Hi, everybody. My name is Christy Craig. I am the publisher here at Hidden Timber Books. Hidden Timber Books is a very tiny press in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. We've got just a few books under our belt, but when COVID began, we started this small press author reading series as a way to help promote books that maybe came out during this time when all the book events were canceled and whatnot, but also to help start building community. It's the small press world is one that really depends on readers and authors and other presses to help us push our work out there to everyone. So it's been a great opportunity to meet authors and readers from near and far. And so I want to welcome you tonight. We are hosting Will Johnson from Texas, and he's going to read a little bit from his debut novel, If or When I Call. And I'm really excited. I want to share a little bit about Will with you. He's a musician who has played in several bands, including Centromatic, New Multitudes, and Monsters of Folk. He's also an artist whose work centers around baseball and history. His written work has appeared in American short fiction, and he was born in Missouri, now lives in Texas, my home state, and all of this makes him the writer that he is. So tonight we get to celebrate his debut novel, If or When I Call, which is published by Goliad Media. And welcome, Will. Thanks so much for being here with us.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. I see some friends. I'm super happy to see a few familiar faces up and coming to the first reading. I've made a living, at least taking the chance on making a fool of myself on rock and roll stages for 31 years now. So it's time to try some new flirtations with some new risks with all that. At any rate, as Christy said, I come from Missouri, a small town called Kennett, which is down in the Boot Heel. It sort of nestles into Arkansas, and it's not so far from the Mississippi. And most of this book is set in that region and involved a little bit of spiritual and mental, but also physically going home again, just to research some of the roads and locations to make sure I had things right in my mind's eye. I started in on this about 3 summers ago on a trip down to Mexico, and my idea, I'd been offered publication by Goliad Media to write a book in 2015, but they never really specified exactly what it had to be, because in the end, it didn't have to be anything. It could have been fiction or road stories or memoirs or essays or a combination of any of it, even drawings or poems. And I was largely intimidated by that for about 2 years. I didn't quite know what direction to take things. And then I went down to Mexico a few summers ago and decided I'd roam the streets of San Miguel each day, and then at night I would come home and write as much as I could. And that started with a short story called Renewal. And I got a few other things written at that time, but Renewal was about an 8 or 9 page little ride that I finally felt satisfied enough with to start sharing and showing to some close friends. And I sent it to a few writers that I love dearly and trust, and was curious to finally get some feedback if I was crazy or not, essentially. And within a few weeks, my good friend Don Lee submitted it to American Short Fiction without me knowing, because I'm still pretty shy about that kind of thing, but he submitted it, and very graciously and fortunately, they picked that story up. And then over the next month or two, I was conflicted because I was coming to terms with the fact that I wanted to spend more time with these characters. And so I started stretching the story outward in each direction and kind of casting them into new situations. figuring out how they relied and needed each other, but also what kind of pitted them against each other at certain junctures as well. It's a family story. It definitely involves addiction and unidentified disease, an unidentified condition. It involves a father and a mother who are trying to negotiate their own rocky waters as they separate, but also try to care for their teenage son. Um, the the mother has a very strong-willed, uh, hospitable, supportive sister about 25 miles up the road from where they live, and that's where the mother goes. It's her safe haven for a little while until she finally takes off on her own for a bit. And in the end, the backdrop here is a picture that I'm sure a number of y'all are familiar with, but it involves the gutted, kind of hollowed out nature of small town America. It's a classic. It's based on my hometown. It's a classic situation of where the massive Walmart moves in and kills the downtown and shifts the economy and a lot of the social nature of the town as well. It's depressed, and they're trying to figure out how to make a good life for themselves and how to navigate these waters and get their footing in the face of all these forces that are kind of against them. And we're dealing with people that don't often leave, say, the 100-mile radius of their town. So that was an emotional thing to go back to because I grew up in this town, and a lot of these people I knew, and there are a number of people that I kind of retroactively took notes from, and so there are some real accounts from my childhood. But at any rate, that's what inspired me to stretch Renewal outward into a full novel, which is called If or When I Call. So kind of a long-winded explanation of it, but just some background on it if you haven't read it. So.
I love that. I'm glad that you shared that background. I'm really fascinated with, stories that are rooted in place, but just also what you said about going down to Mexico and walking around in that space and then coming to a story that took place in a totally different part of
That's right.
the world. And what was it about walking around in the streets of Mexico that really rang true to the small town that you wanted to go back to?
I think I was feeling far, and I had already gone through a phase of revisiting some of those memories not long before through a musical project that I'm involved in called Marie Lepanto. And even the name of the band it's named after an actual exit off of I-55 between Memphis and the Missouri state line. It's two small towns in northeast Arkansas. But that project or that record was made in Memphis in the fall of 2016. And that was a pretty heavy way to make a record because most records I've ever made have been made here in Texas, and I stay close to home. But this particular one had me going back to the home territory again because Memphis was the closest city of any consequence to Kennett, Missouri. It's where we went to see Santa Claus, or it's where we went to buy shoes to get back to school clothes, and it's where all the good radio stations were if you could get them. And so it was the closest hub of any culture. So to go back there and make a record made me a little nostalgic for those days. My mother and I would always take a trip to Memphis on my birthday. She'd say, look, we could have a birthday party or we'll go to Memphis for the weekend. And every single time I wanted to go to Memphis for the weekend just because I love that city so much. So to make that record there and then start writing this book there kind of felt like a continuation of that particular creative endeavor. I always had a feeling I'd want to write a book about home. I just didn't exactly know how I wanted to go about it. But after making that record, going down to Mexico solo, I just realized that I wanted to keep kind of tilling that soil, so to speak.
like you, I live in two different places, basically Texas and Wisconsin. And so that idea of going home, it comes up in either place. I'm going home to Texas or I'm going home to Wisconsin. And so, often writing about home in one way or another is just, kind of like what you were talking about, sort of a spiritual process of,
Yeah, it is a little bit. And there's a little, I'm oddly protective of that part of the country. It's definitely a part of the country that a lot of people would not think twice about, or maybe you drive through there and never think about it again. But I still keep in touch with a number of old friends there, and still have some family there, and it's it's pretty rough. I'm grateful to be here in Texas, but at the same time, I'm oddly sentimental and protective about uh, that little corner of the universe too.
mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
The father of the teenager, his name is Parker, and Parker experiences intense, just high level alcoholism as he's trying to deal with this undiagnosed problem. And this problem involves very random fits that happen in short bursts where he essentially blacks out each time they occur. And these fits can come on quick. They're in public at times. Sometimes they're just out in the garage. But it always involves a burst of nonsensical blabber and essentially him coming back to after something's gone down. So the first section I'll read is when he goes to the second doctor. I go through this series of doctors. There's Dr. A, Dr. B, and Dr. C. And the first section comes from when he goes to Dr. B to essentially get a second opinion and see if maybe honestly he can get some medication. I think he's subconsciously looking for some sort of fix in his way. So I don't know if it's okay to go ahead and read this first section, or what do you think?
Yep,
Okay.
definitely.
It's probably the tics, Dr. B said. What? The tics. Just random movements, vocalizations, he said, looking over my file. The way you've described the fits, it may be a complex version, but I think you should write it out for a while. Write it out? I asked. Yeah, just watch your diet and exercise. Go easy on the caffeine. I do all that, mostly. This may be due to an abnormality within the brain, or depression, or stress. Depression? Or all three, he said. I paused. Of course, it could be ADHD too. All these things could be late onset. Suddenly, Dr. B was cocky too. What I'm saying is go easy, he said. How many hours a week are you clocking? I don't know, somewhere between 45 and 55. We'll see about peeling that back some. How? I need to make money. Meditate. Meditate? Go easy, he said. I know you probably thought this out, but if you're in a public space and you feel one coming on, try to get yourself somewhere quiet. Maybe a backyard or a bathroom, even the car. All right, but overall, just go easy. Come see me again in 3 months. So no prescription? I asked. Cut your hours back, exercise, and meditate, he said. That's the prescription. He headed out the door toward another call, suddenly full cocky now. I went on home and shut all the blinds. I took off my shirt and sat cross-legged in the middle of the living room. I put my hands facing upward on my knees and took a few deep breaths. At first, I felt silly, but this was like I'd seen on TV and in the movies. After maybe 3 minutes of deep breaths, I started to feel pretty good. I kept my eyes closed and kept taking deep breaths. I started thinking on this new setup with Melinda and me living apart. For once, I didn't think about it in an angry way, just thinking about our new paths some and how Ben might be handling it. He was a young man suddenly. He was at the age where he was starting to say thank you. He would say it with a straight face, holding eye contact so that I knew he meant it. Maybe the recent setbacks in our lives brought on more compassion. Struggle and loss can do that. Thank you for doing the laundry. Thank you for handing me the knife. Thank you for the supper. Thank you for the ride back to Mama's. He was more focused, He'd eased into a more sincere of talking. He knew himself better, and he was growing up. The summer days were young, but it was already hot. The regular sound of lawnmowers and weed eaters hummed through the neighborhood nearly every morning. The fireflies were back, the dogwoods still thriving, and the air weighed heavy in the afternoons. Melinda had left almost 5 months ago. She'd moved 25 minutes up the road to Clarkton. Her sister had 2 extra rooms for her and Ben. Melinda had also taken up with a new guy, coached Little League in his spare time, Rotary or Kiwanis, maybe. His name was Chad, I heard. Intense and fit and caring, I heard. Served in Afghanistan or Iraq and was a good cook, I heard. So it all was said. I was still in the house. It was a lot more space than I needed, but I'd stay a while longer. Work with the cable company was busy, and I had a little money saved back. I needed some more furniture and maybe some better decorations. Melinda took a lot of that stuff, the stuff that makes the house a home. She either put it in storage for wherever she was going next, or boxed it up and put it out in Maureen's garage. Ben switched schools to Clarkton when Melinda moved and stayed with me every other weekend. I didn't have a lot to offer around here. I could admit that with certainty. I'd never been much of a cook, and there's only a few small things even in the fridge. We kept his bed here for now. I slept on a mattress in a box spring in Melinda's in my old room. I found some new curtains for cheap, and little by little I was trying to make something of the place. Looking at it all, I think Ben felt for both me and his mama. Last year's attitude had been replaced by this new thoughtfulness. I was thankful for that. I opened my eyes and felt a little better. I took one more deep breath and stretched my arms upward. I stood up, put my shirt back on, and laid down on the couch under the cool breeze of the fan for a little while until I dozed off. The next day was Saturday. I sat at the kitchen table paying bills and heard the low buzz of the mower outside. Ben had gotten up before me and was already cutting the grass. I had a good view from the backyard from the table, and he came in sweaty. You did a diagonal cut and not a straight one, I said, looking up from my bills and the checkbook. Yeah, he said, breathing heavy. It looks good. Ben looked back out at the yard and shrugged. You can tell a lot about a person by the way they cut their grass, he said. Well, it looks good. Thanks. You mowed around the rain lilies. Yep. No one's hardly ever spared the rain lilies around here when they mow. Well, that's the kind of person I want to be, he said. He went on down the hall to shower and then turned back and stopped at the edge of the hallway. Dad? Yes, son. I was wondering when I might be able to have a car of my own. I don't know, Ben. I'll have to think about that. Okay, well, like what? Like for how long? Like how long will you have to think about it? Well, you keep sparing the rain lilies and the like, and it'll be here sooner than later, I said. He smiled and gave a small nod and then went down the hall. We went to the Brown Derby for our traditional Saturday burgers. Our town considered it a bar, and they usually wouldn't let a kid his age in. But for 2 years now, they'd made exceptions. Ben could almost pass for being of age anyway. We took our regular booth and settled in. There were a few guys shooting pool, and the same baseball game was on both TVs. I haven't asked in a while, but how's Clarkton? It's fine, he said, hesitant. What do you think about the school situation? A little behind what we're doing here, but it's fine. You think Mama's going to hang up Marines for a while or get her own place? I don't know. It's a place to land. But is it a good place to land? I asked. It's cheap, Ben said. And Mama doesn't seem to want to move me again, at least not right now. For all the things that Melinda and I had come to disagree on, we both at least agreed on that. We didn't want Ben juggled around any more than he already was. You got a girl? I asked. What? You got a girl up there yet? He turned away and looked over at the pool table, then back. Well, I laughed. A couple wrote me notes, some when school was in. They call sometime. Yeah, it's nothing, Dad. He looked back at the pool table. Well, what about friends? A couple, I guess, here and there. Are you going to work this summer? Maybe. I might pitch watermelons if I can get rides out to the fields. A teenage kid brought our burgers out and we ate. Pool balls clacked behind us, and the announcer's voice on the TV escalated like someone had scored or made a good play. "How is your mama?" I asked. But as soon as the words were out of my mouth, I realized I only half cared to know. "She's all right," he chewed, "working some at the Farm Bureau, doing books, part time. Is it a summer job? I don't know, I guess. She seems to like it okay." We went on eating. The teenage kid came around and asked if everything was okay right when both our mouths were full. Without looking up, Ben and I both nodded yes. Melinda had moved from job to job in her last couple of years here, from the funeral home to the savings and loan, then to the steakhouse and the pizza place. She and a cook she'd been sweet on were closing up, but had forgotten to lock the door. One of the other cooks came by to pick up his check and found her leaned up against the ice machine with her skirt up, first cook on top of her. They were both fired the next day, and the whole town got to talking. Then word got around that people had already seen her out with the Iraq vet guy. There wasn't much to fight about. It all happened. Sometimes folks get frisky, something takes over, and before you know it, you're propped up on an ice machine and it's all happening. With a lot of folks, I guess it's hard to know when the switch might flip to where it's time to risk it all. That night told me that Melinda had long moved on mentally and now physically. She moved up to Clarkton a week or so after the ice machine thing. New town, clean slate.
Thank you. I was taking a lot of notes just listening to all that. You know, there's a lot of tension in that chapter, first of all, through all of the short dialogue. It's short dialogue, but you can still feel the tension. You can still feel the emotions. You know, you can feel the frustration with Parker trying hard and being dismissed over and over, apparently. And then there's Ben. You know, it's really nice to hear authors read their work out loud, because you see it and you feel it on the page, but then there's this added layer of texture that comes in just hearing you read it. And I really loved you know, all those parts in that chapter about Ben. It's like he's quietly surviving, just sort of quietly weaving in and out of his parents' struggles. I love that quote after mowing. It's just the kind of person I want to be. And you know, it makes me think a lot about the structure of your novel, because the way it's written, some of the chapters look almost like poems, and it's because the dialogue is short, but they read like journal entries too. And so it's just a really cool way to reveal story and to reveal character, and instead of just writing it all out in a natural prose that you would expect. So I'm curious, when you were writing and working on revisions and things like that, how you came to that structure, if there was a particular reason why you wanted to keep it in that short sentence framework.
Well, the character of Ben was a bit of an experiment out of the gates that took hold in a way that was appealing to me, because he is a kid of few words, like many teenagers are, and I knew I wanted him to represent some of that energy. And when you get to his chapters are laid out in a way where it's just sentence, 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 and it's a lot of the time it's his thoughts. He's not speaking this; he's just thinking it. And actually, that's one of the next things that I'll read. But I knew that I wanted him to have that terseness, but also slowly over the course of the book become this common denominator of strength and even wisdom that Melinda and Parker, his parents, kind of wind up orbiting around to a certain degree. Ben, I wanted to be steady as they come. I mean, steady as can be. And the experiment was to see if I could carry that through, you know, through the journey. And so even when he's in conversation, he's pretty, you know, he's still pretty reserved, but that doesn't mean that there's nothing going on. There's a whole lot going on. He's surveying, but he's also going through a pretty intense transition as a teenager, with the uncertainty of the future of his parents and relocating to a new town and dealing with new partners, uh, dealing with his dad's condition, dealing with his dad's alcoholism, getting a lot. So he's in a sense he's taking so much in while all this other energy kind of goes on around him.
Yeah, well, let's hear you read, but I'd love
Either
to hear Ben's chapter.
okay. This is after Ben and Melinda have moved up to Clarkton, and he's kind of settling in and trying to understand Chad, the new guy. Chad waits till Mama and Maureen have gone to work, then mostly chills. Chad got a new fat boy. Chad brought it over to Maureen's last week. I guess it's here to stay. Says TV's better here. Says AC's better here. Says his roommate's tough to deal with. Says his roommate's always hanging around. Chad goes to Rotary sometimes, then mostly chills. Chad had a cooking job up till April. Chad had his own place last year. Chad coached some Little League last year. Chad likes to kick it. Chad likes to start slow, then taper. At least that's what I see when I'm here. Last week I said, Chad, you want to throw the ball? Chad said no. I said, why? Chad said, go out there and throw it up in the air. Catch it yourself. I said, what? Chad said, throw it up in the air. Catch it yourself. It's the same thing. Chad never turned away from the TV. Chad ate from a stadium tumbler. It was filled with white bread chunks and whole milk. Chad said, good luck. Car racing was on. Mama was gone. Maureen was gone. I went out there. I couldn't believe it. I tried what Chad said. Ball up, ball down. Sucked. I sat down on the curb and thought about home. I looked around and thought about Clarkton. I looked down and thought about Dad down there in Rutherford. Back inside, back in the AC, back in the dark. Dog in fight, fight in dog, Chad says. Car racing was still on. Long tenor fart resonates off the new fat boy. Fart reverberations all inside the new fat boy. Chad laughs. Hard cackles. Chad shifts around on the new fat boy, throws his arms out, and heaves a big sigh. Back outside. Mama likes him. Chad wears shades in the house some days. Chad's cradling the tumbler of white bread and whole milk. Chad's finished half of it. Chad hits pause and gets up from the fat boy. Chad takes a break to go whiz. Chad says, Ben, do me a solid, bring me a beer. Chad says, Ben, do me a solid and turn down the AC. Chad says, that your dad in that pic you keep by your bed? Chad says, what's he like? Chad says, well, maybe I'll meet him one day. 4 o'clock, first beer. 4:20, second beer. 5 o'clock, third beer. 5:30, fourth beer. Racing ends. Chad says, how'd it go out there? Chad says, you may be too small. Chad looks straight ahead. 6:20, fifth beer. It's June now, longest day of the year. Back outside. Ball up, ball down. Back inside. 6:50, sixth beer. Mama's coming home. Maureen's coming home. I thought Mama can do better than Chad. I thought this can't be all. I thought about Dad. Mama shows up. Maureen shows up. TV keeps going. Chad keeps watching. Chad says, hey, babe, to whoever listens. Chad says, how'd it go today? To whoever listens. It's almost summer. It's almost supper, sorry. Summer, so whatever. It's all the same.
Yeah, I love that chapter. I love the repetition in your work. You know, like you were saying, Ben he's always surveying. It's very clear in that chapter, especially, you know, he's counting the beers, which is, you know, what happens when you're living with an alcoholic. So, I'm curious, you kind of answered this question before, but I'm just wondering about the characters in the story and how it came to be. Was it the place that determined the characters? Was it the characters that determined that came to you first and it determined you needed to have it happen in this particular place? Or, I guess I'm asking kind of like that seed of the idea.
A little bit of both, I think, and I think it's a character to character basis. Um, there are parts of Chad that are based on somebody that I knew and grew up around for part of my life. And um, to be completely frank, the whole go out and throw the ball up in the air and catch it yourself, it's the same thing. That was a direct personal experience that I had. And I knew I wanted to pull from that because it's so ridiculous. It's so, but it's also so deeply funny to me because it is the, then it's just the pit of laziness, of parental laziness. And of course, when it happened to me when I was 8 or 9, it wasn't very funny. I didn't like it at all. But as I've grown up and now that I'm a parent myself, it's dark humor, but it is just so deeply funny to me that um, that would be suggested as the same thing. But then again, it's small town summer and it's monotony, and it is sitting inside by the air conditioner while the world swelters and watching car racing and uh, nursing your digestive system with whole milk and white bread out of a stadium tumbler so that you can keep pouring beer on top of that. And these are kind of dark things to touch on, but these are things that I saw through my childhood, and I guess I've carried some of those notes with me on into this book. But anyway, so yeah, there's obvious tension there between Chad and Ben, and Ben's trying to make heads or tails of what this life is going to be about at this new place where this guy's just hanging around. Um, so yeah, inevitably there's some tension with that for sure. And Ben is also he's also extremely loyal and protective of his parents as the book goes, and so uh, I think it's safe to say that he probably sees Chad as a threat.
So, thinking about the whole baseball, throwing the baseball up and down, you've got, and speaking from life experience, I know you and I were talking before that you have this love for baseball, and that's part of your art, baseball and history. And I would love to know about that movement between art and music, and how those two pieces of creativity just sort of urged you or pushed you into writing. I mean, you're always writing when you're writing songs, but it's a different kind of writing when you're putting it all into a big book.
That's true. It's very true. The songwriting definitely, like, I mean, going back 25 years from when I was in college, I knew that I wanted to try to write a book one day, but I always joked that my attention span was too short. So all I really committed myself to were these 3 and 4 minute short stories in forms of song. Um, and over time, that became comfortable to where I kind of abandoned the idea of writing the book later on through my 30s and even early 40s. But it was with the literal challenge set by Goliad. I sat down with Chris Welch in September of 2015, and he essentially challenged me to write a book, and I couldn't say no to it. I figured at this point I should develop the patience to at least try, and if it fails, if it all blows up, well, then I at least gave it a shot. But it is it is not so different from assembling a series of songs that might work together. It's just that it requires a whole new calibration of the mindset and the and pacing and acceptance, knowing that this is not going to be like a record and take 2 or 3 weeks to write, and then another week to record, and then a week to master. Um, this will take years. So there was a little disconnect in there, and there was just an accepting of some new rules, so to speak. With the baseball paintings, they're not quite as they're not fictional. They're based on history, so those are just more hard facts. They're a little less mysterious, or a little less um, kind of less of plays on language than, say, the book or the songs can be, because they are more statistically based. But at the same time, my goal with the paintings is for each to just represent its own tribute and its own transmission of history, and not just, the history of the sport, but some of the history of our country as well. So they're slightly connected, I suppose, in their ways. Um, but the book was really an exercise in just stretching out a number of songs, essentially, the songs being chapters.
Every creative likes a challenge, right? When someone tosses that our way.
I couldn't resist. I just couldn't resist. There were a few
Right.
false there were a few false starts, and I joke about it now, but I got to a point where uh, I don't even know if I'm supposed to talk about this, but I tried to give the advance money back twice because I felt an immense amount of guilt for having put that in my bank account and then just not turned anything in for literally 2 years. And that bothered me a whole lot. And then, so I, after trying to give it back the second time, I said, look, when I turn something into you, if you want to give it back, then we can do it. But Darren and company very graciously said, no, keep it, hold to the challenge, take your time, and we'll talk to you when we talk to you. And that was a very kind and trusting endorsement, which I'll always be appreciative of. And it just took a matter of a few things taking hold to finally see it through.
It's nice to have that, clearly they had faith. They knew it was going to be a good story once it got to the page.
I appreciated it. There were times, there was a lot of, there's a lot of cul-de-sacs. I'm sure you probably encounter this all the time, but there's a lot of cul-de-sacs, and you have to back out of those, and then maybe back all the way back down the ditch and figure a new way to dig it. but
Yeah.
and it's highly unglamorous, those visions of riders sitting on the banks of rivers and eating grapes and just coming up with whimsical, genius things. That stuff went out the window real fast when,
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to change a diaper, but also get this line down, just get this character right. And I developed a whole new respect for writers at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. That kind of leads me to my next question. The how it works. You get your first draft down, and then by the time you get to the end of the real published story,
Yeah.
things have really morphed quite a bit. So, do you feel like the story changed at all from beginning to end, or do you feel like the core of it was consistent and it was just sort of fine tuning pieces of it?
I would have to go back to the first draft, but I can say, just even in my mind's eye, I kind of had the core of it in place. I would say I had 80 to 85% of it, even where I wanted it after the first draft. And then came, uh, frankly, just backing away from it for a few months, and then coming back in and tweaking certain things, and then adding some things. I knew after a conversation with Kathy Porres at Algonquin that I needed to work on Melinda a little bit more and put her in, frankly, a scary situation or two. I needed to not be afraid to hurt characters that I'd come to love, and so that took some surgery and some working over in drafts 2 and draft 3. But again, backing up, I'd say 80% of it felt like it was mostly in place. I knew how I wanted it to be, and I kind of knew how I wanted the ride to go, and I knew how I wanted it to end. It was just a matter of kind of going back to certain sections and working them over a little more, and just transmitting them better. I don't love writing dialogue. I like it better now, but at first I despised it. But that was a hurdle to get over. You just got to figure out how to make it work to your own ear, and hopefully it goes over elsewhere too, you know.
Yeah, that surprises me that you didn't like it because the dialogue reads very natural. It's very good.
I did not like it at first at all.
Yeah.
And I don't use quotation marks, and maybe that was part of my shirking it a little bit, but I just didn't really enjoy it at first. I wanted to write more about setting and placement and descriptives, and the dialogue was something that I really had to practice with a little bit, and I still do. So,
Yeah. Would you
so
like to read a little bit from Melinda's character?
yeah, I can read from Melinda's character real quick. Um, I don't know about real quick, but I'll read from Melinda's character. This is a section after she takes off. Her sister loans her a dependable car, and Melinda finally leaves the state of Missouri for the first time in a little while, which is a pretty big deal for her. I kept to Highway 37 northbound. The big river drifted away through the trees on my right, then out of sight toward the east. The land opened back up to corn and soybean fields, and eventually the lower end of a wildlife refuge. I drove with the windows down most of the way, and there was hardly a cloud in the sky. There was a long running swath of cypress trees running east to west where I turned onto 169. The shadows along the highway became longer and more prominent. I stopped for gas in a little town called Karnak. An electronic bell rang as I pulled the door open, and my eyes adjusted to the light as I found myself in a gray cinder block room. Only about half the lights were on inside. The counter and register were to my left, and to my right were three angled aisles, sparsely stocked and full of the usual candy, snacks, motor oil, a few dusty mossy oak caps, some hunting and gun and people magazines, cans of Vienna sausages, chunky soup, dog food, cat food, small section of school supplies, and some toiletries. Beyond the register was a grill. It was dark back there, cleaned up like that part of the store was closed for the day. There were two booths by the front window, and a Bud poster with the Cardinals schedule hung crooked on the wall by the door. The place smelled like a mixture of fried food and cleaning chemicals. There were no other customers, and the clerk looked caught up and unstressed. He leaned with one hand on the counter and one hand on the register, looking out toward the highway. Maybe his mid afternoon lull. He was older, lanky, with long gray hair. He wore a loose navy blue pocket t shirt, and a red vest hung off his frame. He seemed to be taking stock of all that the day had given him, or what it might still. He had an ease about himself, seemed content in the moment, and there was something fatherly and wise about him. I wondered if he had kids, and if he did, what they were like. There was a small portable radio off to his right, near where all the binders and paperwork sat. It played Don Williams' It Must Be Love at low volume. I pulled Maureen's envelope out of my pocket and pulled one of the bills out. Can I get 20 of unleaded, please? I pushed my hair out of my face. Yes, ma'am, he said, pulling out of his reverie. Also, how much longer is it to Metropolis? Metropolis? He asked. Yeah, this road goes over that way, right? He turned and centered himself toward the counter, fully awake now. Yeah, hon. You know they got a giant Superman statue right there in the center of Metropolis? No. A museum, too, he blurted. You headed to the casino? Just driving, I mumbled. What's that? He asked loud. Yeah, I guess. I mean, the casino. Thinking about going there. Well, this may be another 40 minutes, he said. Where you coming from, hon? Clarkton. Clarkton in Missouri, I interrupted. Oh, he said. Well, Metropolis gets busy on the weekends because of the casino. A lot of people come over the river from Kentucky. Did you get a reservation? What? A reservation for a room. Did you get one? No. No? I never got a reservation for much of anything. I'm just going. Well, you might call and make one. It's Saturday, and that place is about the only option in town. I wouldn't want you to go all the way over. If I can't stay there, I'll find somewhere else, I said. I looked out toward Maureen's car. Or I'll head back home. We both paused. I'll take a receipt, I said. I can give you the receipt after you've pumped the gas, he said. See if the car takes it all, okay? I said, all right, and I went out and put gas in the car. As the pump ran, I thought about the reservation thing some. I'd look at the map and see what else was around there. I sure wanted to stay in that fancy casino hotel like I'd heard about. I'd never done that before, and I already had it all in my head. I heard the bathrooms there were about the size of a living room. I heard there were robes and little bottles of soap and lotion. I pictured a big, clean bed and lots of channels to look at, maybe even a view of the river. I already had every bit of that stuff in my head. The car took all $20, and I went back into the store. I got the receipt and walked the aisles for a minute. I looked at the candy bars and gum and wondered how much my check card had on it. I hadn't looked at the account in a while, not since I was on Maureen's computer maybe last weekend. There wasn't much then. I rounded the first aisle near the counter, looking at the jerky, and the man broke the silence. So you're just out riding around, hon? Yeah, I said. All by yourself? Yeah, I said, still looking over the chips and pork rinds and pretzels. A long trip or a short one? A short one, just a temporary flea. A temporary what? Just driving for a while, you know? I think I do. I used to take off to the Upper Peninsula of Michigan every few summers, he said. Well, I've never been over this way, I said. Really? Oh, it gets nice further east, rolling hills and state parks. I've only ever been to Arkansas, Memphis, and Tunica, Mississippi, I said. Well, goodness, hon, you stay close to home. I know. Well, there ain't nothing wrong with that. A lot of folks do. He stared back out across the road. Family? He asked, turning back toward me. Yeah, a son and work. They keep me plenty busy. Well, hon, you're in beautiful country over this way. A little further, you'll hit Shawnee National Forest and Garden of the Gods Recreation Area. You camp? I'm just in it for a nice place tonight, I said. Where's your son? Back home with his dad. I see. Well, how's that? Transitional. I see. You ain't running from someone, are you? He asked, outright. No. I mean, just recent times, I guess. What, hon? I feel like I'm running from the past couple of years, I said. We paused. I don't know why I'm telling you this, I said, ready to take it all back and leave. Well, that's all right now. I don't know of anyone that ain't wanted to run from at least a chapter or two of their own story. I stayed silent for a minute and looked out the front window. I'm going to head on, I said. Wait a sec, hon. You got a proper map or anything? I got an old one. Well, here, hon, take this one. He reached under the counter and laid out a brand new folded map of Illinois. I bet this one's more updated than what you got. I paused. Here, he pushed it across the counter toward me. Thanks, I said. I opened it up and found out where we were. How long you been out driving, hon? Just a couple days. Well, this feels strange for me to say, and I sure hope you don't take it wrong, but you look thin. You eaten much lately? Right then, I realized I hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon, before I got to Cairo. Some, I said. Well, listen, and again, I hope you don't take it wrong, but I got all these chicken tenders and some catfish here in the warmer. I never have much of a rush on a Saturday, and you're welcome to... No, I don't want. It's not a handout, hon, he said, cutting me off. We just never sell through it all on Saturdays. Weekdays we do, but Saturdays we don't, ever. Byron always makes too much in the mornings. We have to take it home or throw it out. I looked up at him through my hair. There was a kindness in his gray eyes and in the crow's feet flanking them. And I get tired of eating all this stuff anyway, he laughed. I felt myself surrender half a smile. I looked out at the car and then back at him. Y'all really just throw this out? Yeah, and I'm tired of all this food being wasted. I'm Leighton, he said. He extended his right hand, and I shook it. I'm Melinda. He moved over to the warmer and grabbed the tongs. You want for here or to go, hon? He asked. I looked at the empty booths by the window. I'm not in a hurry, I said. I'll sit for a few. He pulled out a sheet of red and white check paper and put it in the basket. He put 2 chicken strips and 2 catfish fillets in. Then he piled some fries on. You want any gravy or ketchup? Gravy, I said. He pulled a small styrofoam cup off a stack and filled it with gravy. He wedged it in amongst the chicken and fish and fries. He handed it over to me over the warmer and motioned toward the plasticware behind me. Y'all got toothpaste here? I asked. Of course, Leighton said. It's right down that third aisle among the toiletries. Cool, I said. I forgot mine. I'll get some before I go. I grabbed a plastic fork and knife and 2 napkins and went and sat down. The booth overlooked a couple newspaper machines, 5 parking spots, and Maureen's car still sitting out there by pump number 2. Beyond that was a highway and the fading line of cypress trees. Still no traffic to speak of. You want me to move my car off the pump? It's fine. Eat, hon. I bit into the catfish and then the fries. All of it merged together in my mouth and felt like a gift from above. The warmth and salt and grease ran over the back of my tongue, and with it, I felt a solitary and uninterrupted happiness. As I chewed, I looked down at my knees shaking. My body felt a pure delight. I looked back up and ate more. Leighton went back to the counter and went through some receipts. I heard Roseanne Cash's 7-Year Ache come on the radio behind him. He hummed along and wrote things down. I looked out across the road, and then I turned my head back down and kept eating.
Thank you. You know,
Yeah.
there's an intimacy, a kind of intimacy in small towns that you don't really find elsewhere, and that chapter is a great example of that.
I wanted to, I mean, for all the pressure cooker that Melinda and Maureen and Parker and Ben's small town can be, with everybody kind of up in everybody's business, I wanted there to at least be a glimpse for Melinda once that she was out in the world and across the Mississippi River and into totally unfamiliar territory, kind of off on her voyage. I needed her to encounter something friendly and something hopeful and someone positive and that was generous. And Leighton kind of provided that energy in the wake of some pretty rough days for sure. And sometimes that energy comes from a friend, or sometimes it comes from a complete stranger like Leighton here.
Well, one thing I want to say real quick before Kathy has a question, just that phrase of taking stock. I really like that phrase, and you know, it kind of speaks to the whole book. They're all taking stock of each other, of their own situations, of the places around them, just trying to find their way. So that's you know, sometimes it's fun to read through a whole book and then find just a few words that really home in on what the story is about. So,
Yeah.
Kathy.
Oh, I didn't have anything. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to add that, yeah, Leighton spends, most of his life looking out that window and over that parking lot. And he seems to constantly be taking stock. He's kind of the guard of the whole property in his way. And so to encounter a curious individual like Melinda just passing through on her own, and kind of having that interaction, I think was maybe helpful. I want to believe it was helpful for both of them in a way.
So Kathy, you've got a really great question. Kathy has this great question. Just following up on my question about people, place, the chicken and the egg question. Obviously, there's a complex stew of observation, direct personal experience, and fabrication that goes into character and context development. But can you identify if and how much of the characters might have evolved from a curiosity of who you might have been or what you might have lived had you stayed in Kennett? Do you speculate on this ever? Does it live in the book at all?
That's a great question. And also, hi, Kathy. I'm super glad you're here. A little bit of it is speculation, without a doubt. And I don't think that it was overtly conscious. I think that there are some things that are subconsciously woven in there. But I left Kennett when I was 12, just a few years before I was Ben's age. And by the time I was 12, I had, as a kiddo, I had watched my mom go through 2 divorces. So I had some experience with with just kind of the difficulty of watching a parent go through that. I don't have any memory of the first one. I'm still extremely close with my dad, but watching her go through the second divorce was pretty tough. But I think it made us stronger, and it made us tighter, and it made us better friends. And so perhaps subconsciously through the character of Ben, there might have been a little speculation there. It's just hard to know how that would have shaken out or how it would have turned out, I suppose. But I think you're onto something there. And also, there are characters in here that are based on people that I never specifically knew about, but kind of wondered about, and had my own, right or wrong, had my own strange sort of takes on, even as a kiddo. And so I did carry some of that energy over into the book.
Very nice. I think it's natural that our experiences weave their ways into our writing, whether it's nonfiction or fiction. And yeah, I mean, they make us who we are. So we have come to the end of our hour, Will, and I've really enjoyed listening to you read. I've really enjoyed the conversation.
Awesome.
So I'm sorry, my grandfather clock's going to do its thing right now, but it is 8 o'clock on the dot. But I want to thank you all for being here this evening on a Thursday night. It's really great having you here. This has been a fun series. So stop by hiddentimberbooks.com and check out who's coming down the line. Keep an eye out. I want to drop Will's information in the chat one more time so that you can visit his website and take a look at his book and purchase your own copy. And support Goliad Media and Will. And thanks so much for being here.
Thank you guys so much for coming by. This has been this is my first reading, so this is really exciting and kind of wild sensations, and I appreciate you guys being a part of it. And thank you for having me, Christy.
Welcome. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, y'all.